Welcome. I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. At the beginning of every video, I remind the listeners to pause, hit the space bar, pause the video, grab a notepad and a pen so that you can jot down little notes throughout and make a commitment to yourself right now that you will implement some positive change in your business. So you're going to jot down some action items, a little bit of homework. And with that in mind, let's dive right in, get started here. I'm excited about today's topic because it's something that I talk about all the time. And I believe it is the single most important factor in determining the success of your business. And that is the value that you offer, your products or services value. And so think about it. The extent to which you will be successful will be directly related to the value that you offer society. So there's, basically two things that you need to do. You need to create a product or a service and provide that for society. And then you have to communicate that to society. You can't keep it a secret. So you have to engage in some sort of marketing. And I suppose even without the latter, without the marketing, without the communication, it wouldn't be a giant secret, because if you even got one customer, eventually you wouldn't be able to keep the cat in the bag. Of course, a great product, something with a lot of value, would be communicated by your best marketing channel, which should be your satisfied and delighted customers. So that's why I'm saying to you that the most important thing related to your business success is the value that you offer. And so I talk about it all the time, and ordinarily I refer to what I'm going to henceforth refer to as the four intrinsic value constituents. And those are customer experience, convenience, quality, and pricing. But today what we're going to do is we're going to take a deeper dive. We're going to look at each of those, and we're going to look at some generalities about value so that you can really explore this and ask yourself, what can you do? I'm recommending that you, on a daily basis, you have to consistently be working on trying to improve value. If you are not, your competitors will, and you will be surpassed. It doesn't matter how great your product or service is. If somebody else who's competing with you is working to improve their value proposition to the market, they're going to outcompete you. They're going to beat you. They're going to win in the market. They're going to win your customers away from you. So let's make sure that doesn't happen by making sure that you are engaged at minimum weekly, but ideally daily, in a mental exercise of determining what things can you do to add value. And then today with your notepad, what you can do is you can start to brainstorm some ideas. Where are the greatest opportunities for improving value? So let's dive right in and take a look at this. Once again, use the material we cover today to identify the greatest opportunities for improvement of value in your business. You have to sort of take a look at this, and this little sort of checklist that we'll go through will help you to identify those opportunities. And you have to be honest in your evaluation of your business. Where we have to start is with everything in business, you have to measure. You have to measure to improve. That which is measured improves. So by contrast, those things which you fail to measure will struggle to improve. I mean, you may not measure something and you put a lot of effort into something and you may get some improvement, but it would probably be fleeting. It may not be sustainable because you wouldn't know exactly why it is that things are improving. Maybe you've attempted multiple things to try to improve, and some of them working, some of them are not, because you fail to measure. You aren't sure where to double down on your efforts. So measure, improve. What to measure? Make sure you're like everything in your business that you measure will give you an indication of value. If you're successful, that's an indication of value, that you are doing a good job at creating value for society, value for the market in which you compete. I mean, think about it. If you didn't offer value, if your product or service was inferior to alternatives that the market had, or just it wasn't good at all, it wouldn't last. So all the things that you would measure, all the performance metrics for a business would indicate that. They would show you that you're going in the wrong direction. And so anytime you look at your performance metrics in your business and they are not where they should be, you can conclude, therefore, that value is lacking. Ask yourself, if you had great value in your business, if your product or service really represented true value, what could make you fail? The only thing I can think of is maybe that it was a giant secret and you didn't get started. You maybe ran out of capital, you ran out of time before enough people knew about it. But it all starts with value. So take a look at all the things that we would typically measure. Your revenue, your sales, customer satisfaction, retention of your customer base, attrition, marketing effectiveness is a really important one. Conversions, engagements, referrals, repeat transactions, average transaction amount, anything you can think of that you would like to improve in your business. These are indications that you're offering good value. Another thing you have to understand about value is that it is subjective and it's a perception. Okay, so value isn't necessarily black or white or empirically true, so to speak. One person finds value where another does not, and that's what's great. We're diverse as people. We have varying things that appeal to us, that we like, and we have various needs and problems that our products and services of the economy can solve. And so that's why not everybody is going to find value in the same things. So therefore, when you conclude that value is subjective and a perception, then you understand that it is completely futile to try to please all of the people all of the time. Business can either seek to improve intrinsic value, those four things that I mentioned before, of their products or services, or you can seek to change consumer perception through branding and marketing messages. Suppose you could do both. The former is more predictably effective, okay? So that's why we'll focus predominantly on, in this video at least, on improving the intrinsic constituents of value and not worrying about improving our branding and our marketing message to communicate that value. That's maybe a topic for another time, although it's very important. It's not what we're going to focus on today. Consumers can be quite fickle. The hottest product seems to differ every Christmas. I think throughout the decades, there's been the Cabbage Patch dolls, various video game consoles have come and gone, and on any given Christmas, one of those could be impossible to get, and parents are scrambling and pushing one another aside trying to get it. In the 90s, there was the Tickle Me Elmo doll, and when you have movies like Disney's Frozen that blows up, then the Elsa doll becomes the hottest thing, and consumers are fickle. So there isn't one thing that you can rely on that will offer value to consumers indefinitely. Now, I'm not saying that you should be changing your product constantly, but you do have to have a recognition of the psychology of consumers and that their needs change. So that's why it's imperative for you to define your target market and cater to its known and established preferences. So you may know something about the people that you are trying to cater to, right? So if you are trying to cater to a particular age group or a geographical location or a special interest in terms of maybe it's somebody who's into fitness, or you're trying to cater to people that are into fashion, those types of things, know what that target market prefers. There are established patterns and behaviors that you can track and sort of stick to, and then you can adjust and adapt as you notice things are changing in the market when necessary. Value changes throughout the market based on various biases, trends, psychology. There's ubiquitous marketing, propaganda, fluctuation in the availability of resources, alternatives, competing products, services, and there are many other factors that are going to influence what people gravitate toward. And so don't be surprised when consumer behaviors and preferences change, but don't be knee-jerk in your response to that. You have to stick to what you know is valuable, and then keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on for the trends. And if there's something that you are in a unique position to leverage in terms of a trend, then go ahead and do so. And make sure at minimum that you're mitigating the risks of losing a bunch of market share due to a trend or whatever. Don't try to speculate too much in this regard because, as I say, consumers can be quite fickle. Ensure that your business is agile and adaptable to changing market demands, but be loyal to your best customers. It's very frustrating for customers who have been there for you from the beginning and have spent a lot of money in your business, and then all of a sudden you change on a dime. Maybe your favorite restaurant changes its menu. And that's sometimes necessary, and they have to keep up with the times, and sometimes it can be a detriment. So it's really up to management to decide, and it's always a good idea to get customer feedback on that kind of stuff. But you have to define who your best customers are. Is it the person that is been around the longest, who's been with you from the beginning, or is it the person who's maybe representative of the most revenue for you? And is there a possibility that there's a huge swell of customers coming at you that you have to recognize and you have to cater toward them? Try not to abandon your loyal customers, though, is the thing. And as I say, it is an absolute exercise in futility to attempt to please everyone. That will just get you nowhere. If you try to be all things to all people in the market, you will be mediocre at best. You will fail to really impress those that you're seeking to impress. Continually solicit customer feedback to gauge your products or services' value performance, as well as to mine ideas for opportunities for improvement. So, are you sending out surveys? Is there a mechanism in your brick and mortar location that people can give feedback? Are you paying attention to the Google reviews, the Yelp reviews, TripAdvisor, wherever it is that customers are giving feedback? Are you paying attention to that? It can be great. I think about this phenomenon that's going on with Tesla right now, and they don't do official advertising. They have this army of people out there, Elon Musk fanboys, and there's a lot of just lovers of the product that maybe is reminiscent of Apple. Before Tesla, Apple was very much that way. I shouldn't say was. Apple very much is that way. Apple has a lot of people, but there was this following behind Steve Jobs, and he could do no wrong. And there's that similar phenomenon going on with Elon Musk and Tesla right now. And what's great about it for those companies, in particular for Tesla, who unlike Apple doesn't spend money on advertising, is they get just so much word of mouth spreading of their marketing messages. And the real thing that I'm trying to communicate here is they get a ton of ideas. I've seen so many things where, they release the Cybertruck, or they have the unveiling of the Cybertruck, and then over the preceding months and year afterward, there is a lot of people who are, just sort of falling in love with it. They're redesigning it. They're making product suggestions. I mean, the thing hasn't even been produced yet. They've only unveiled the prototype, and before that happens, Elon Musk and his team are getting all these suggestions from people that care and are giving great suggestions. How great would that be for your business at some scale if you can get your customers to give you great ideas for improvement? Seek to exceed expectations. That's a really critical thing. When you understand that value is sort of a perception and that it is subjective, what you want to do is under-promise and over-deliver. Never do the opposite. Don't over-promise and under-deliver. And we see that so much with sales representatives, trying to please the customer, trying to close the sale. They'll say whatever the customer wants to hear. They might even be genuine and hoping for the best in what they're promising. Oh, yes, we can do that. Yes, the product does that, and so on and so on. But that's what hurts people. That's what gets people into trouble. That hurts companies. It hurts the salesperson himself and his reputation, and it hurts primarily the customer when you overpromise. You're going to set yourself up to underdeliver and fail to exceed expectations. Because you want to exceed expectations, this necessitates improvement due to the inherent nature of raising the bar of expectations. So what I'm saying is that every time you go out of your way to do something that exceeds expectations, you've sort of raised the bar a little bit, and all of a sudden your customers now may come to expect that. Try to build in wow factors and intermittent unexpected rewards for your customers. And I say intermittent because, well, first of all, psychology has shown that that's very effective. That's why you'll get these intermittent positive reinforcements in digital technologies such as social media. But that those random rewards where a customer can't expect it each and every time, but it's not promised, it goes above and beyond. That's something that can create an extra wow factor. Go above and beyond occasionally so that you can exceed expectations. That increases value. Utilize very liberal satisfaction guarantees to eliminate customer risk and communicate confidence in your value proposition. Okay, so 100% satisfaction guarantee should be your idea. It should be your attitude. And I would advertise that in some way. And then what you need to do is empower your team to do whatever it reasonably takes to ensure your customers are delighted. So your team needs to be able to keep a customer happy, even if that customer is a little bit unreasonable. If someone's being completely unreasonable, then fair enough, you may have to concede that you're not going to keep that person happy. But we don't manage by the exceptions, and that's so rare that I'd never focus on that. Instead, teach your team that they are empowered to do whatever it takes to keep your customers happy. So that means you're going to need to measure and track extraordinary measures taken by your team in order to please customers. And I would track these both by your team member as well as the customer. So, I use Costco as the example of, I think, the easiest company to get along with when it comes to satisfaction guarantee and refund policy. They're just at the drop of a hat, they will refund your money. Really no questions asked. They're not particularly fussy about having receipts or anything like that. They just know that they want to delight their customers. And that's adding value to the whole experience for their customers. But what I'm saying to you, I will just about guarantee you, they've got a database somewhere where the person who is probably not actively each time when you do a return, but I'll suspect that there's a mechanism that can flag them when there is maybe someone abusing the system, and then maybe a manager gets involved, or they more likely, and certainly a better case scenario, is the person's empowered to make the decision who's handling things on the front line. But again, I wouldn't focus on that too often because that's managing by the exception. Instead, create a very liberal 100% satisfaction guarantee and stand behind it and make sure all of your team knows and that your team understands they're not going to be in trouble for delighting a customer and spending some money. You should accrue money. You should put money aside in your accounting so that you can do this. And you should think of it as a cost of business. Instead of just measuring the cost of sale and your other typical expenses, you may have a fund which you set aside a little bit, you accrue to the expense of your cost of sales, some sort of wow fund or customer delight fund or whatever you want to call it, that you can dip into when your team needs to spend a little bit of extra money to satisfy your customers. I would highly recommend you do that. So let's look at what I've earlier referred to as the 4 intrinsic constituents of value. That being, once again, your customer experience, your convenience, your quality, and your pricing. These are the 4 areas that you're going to continually go to. And I've alluded to them many, many times in our previous discussions. But today, let's dive deeper. Let's take a look at what things make up, what are the elements of each of these 4 constituents, and what can you do? What are you doing? Now, it's really difficult, as is often the case with my videos, in trying to give examples that are relevant to the viewers, because your businesses are wide ranging and varied. So, you might be in the agricultural business, you might be in hospitality, travel, tourism, you may be in software, IT of some kind, you might be in retail, fashion, I'm not sure. And so try to apply this. Don't dismiss any of these points. I mean, some of these things that I say may be more applicable to specific industries, and I think it would be a mistake if you just dismiss something and don't think that it applies at all to you. And reach out to me or make a comment or whatever. I can probably give you an example of how each of these things applies to almost any business. It's really universal, these concepts. So let's go. First thing is the customer experience. What I think of, the very first thing when I think of customer experience, is you need to have friendly interactions with business representatives. And one of the things I did when I was brainstorming the various elements that make up these 4 intrinsic ways of building value is I thought of the opposite of value. And that's sort of a tip I've taken from Stephen Covey, which is, what is the opposite? If you focus on the opposite, what not to do, that'll help you to focus on what things you should do. So I thought to myself, what have I experienced in the past? What products or services have I engaged with? What businesses have I engaged with? And found that there was value lacking. And I do that with each of these things. So with customer experience, have you dealt with a business where their representatives were not very friendly, whether it was over the phone, whether it was a chat, whether it was face-to-face? If the customer service, sales representatives, the manager, whoever isn't friendly, could be even your server, in the hospitality industry, that just ruins the customer experience. These are the things you need to train your people on so that you will have friendly staff. I mean, first of all, you want to hire to ensure that you have people with a good attitude who really enjoy dealing with people. And then take the extra time to train them on some psychology and some customer service skills so that they know. The first one is communication style. So communication is not just the words we say. Of course, there are word tracks you want to train your people to use. But I think of that episode of The Office, I think it's the obscene watermark episode, and all hands on deck handling customer service, and Kelly has to train Angela and others to handle incoming customer concern calls. And Angela's on the phone and she's like, I've already told you that the official position of the company is apologetic. What else do you want from me? Of course, that's a comedy, but I've seen things not that far removed from that in real life. So the word tracks are one thing. You train people to use good word tracks, but also the tonality, facial expression. For goodness sake, people, smile, smile, smile. A smile can go a long way in terms of the customer experience. People want to be smiled to. I worked in one business where there were customer complaints coming in about a particular individual who's actually a delightful person, but the person was very shy, failed to make eye contact and looked down a lot. And customers perceived that as a bad attitude when it wasn't. It was incumbent upon the company to train that individual. Either that person should not have been in that position if she was uncomfortable, or if she was, she needed to learn and eventually did, that making eye contact and smiling was a really big deal. Also, body language, listening skills, being empathic and appreciative. When you are dealing with a business, you want to feel like they appreciate your business, and your team should communicate that to your customers. Another thing is that your team needs to be flexible, not policy driven. You don't want people, I'm sorry, that's our policy, and failing to meet customers' expectations time and again, and merely quoting policy. Throw the policy out the window and do what it takes to keep customers happy. Change your policy to fit your customers as opposed to the other way around. Don't expect your customers to adapt to whatever works for you. Your people need to be well trained, that's what we're saying, but they have to be knowledgeable, and they should communicate in a consultative, not a very aggressive mannerism. And so people want to deal with competent people. The other thing about a good customer experience is that it is respectful of customers' time. There's minimal waiting involved. And of course, waiting is one of the 7 main forms of waste. And so, but waiting is it's the kiss of death for the customer experience. People don't like to wait. If you can somehow disguise waiting in a way that is entertaining, and you sort of camouflage the idea that people are waiting by things are actually happening behind the scenes. I mean, it's that whole proverbial DMV thing where you're just staring at your watch, you're staring at the clock and watching the seconds pass by. But if in some way you had something else to do and were entertained, and the masters of that are the Orlando theme parks, certainly Disney and Universal, and to a lesser degree, but SeaWorld. They do things to try to minimize the inconvenience of the wait, because they know waiting is a big part of their game. And if they didn't do something to mitigate that, their customers wouldn't come back. You also want to make sure that your business has sufficient capacities, because your customer experience is spoiled when you fail to have the capacity to be able to handle the customer. And that leads to wait times and other inconveniences. So some of the things that you can consider there are that you have sufficient customer service personnel. Have you been in one of these big box warehouse retailers and you can't find anyone to help you? Well, that's an example of insufficient capacity to handle the demand of the customers, and it decreases the customer experience. Managers need to work to track and the peak demands and make sure that they're scheduling accordingly. Also, capacities, think about your parking, your registers, or customer checkout if you have that kind of thing. You want to minimize congestion and the effects that are created as a result of peak demands from your customers, lineups and crowd-related impositions. Those are the types of things that sort of make people second guess whether they want to deal with you. So ask yourself, do you have sort of the feast or famine nature to your business? And what are you doing to sort of spread things out, flatten the curve? Let's use that in a more positive sense these days. In the Toyota Way management system, they refer to load leveling as hijunka. So it's a very critical thing to running an efficient operation. So that has to do with your capacities and whether or not your business has that feast or famine, peak demand nature to it. Also, make sure that your processes are efficient and streamlined across the entire process. You want to have few sticking points, fewer clicks if you have an online business, few transactions and handoffs between personnel or departments. That's very frustrating for a customer. You don't want to have the start and stop thing. Everything should feel just natural transition from start to finish. The whole journey that the customer makes to finalizing a transaction should have very few sticking points and should be very streamlined. Your customer experience should be pleasant to all 5 senses. Think about it. Your visual, audible, scent, touch, taste. These are all things that impact the customer experience, and what can you do to impact those? We'll get into those as it relates to quality as well, but you just think about scent marketing as something that you may have noticed in the casinos and big hotels and some places in hospitality. I know grocery stores as well will strategically place the bakeries up front so that people get a pleasant smell when they come in. And of course, grocery stores want to merchandise their stuff very well so that it's very visually appealing. Of course, retail fashion is known for that, and making sure that the mannequins just look great and so on. So look at all of the five senses when you're considering your customer experience. A great customer experience empowers the customer. So you want to engage your customers with full transparency. Access to information and pricing is very frustrating when somebody can't get the information they need and they have to sort of adapt to your way of going through the sales process that may be the polar opposite of what they want. They have to sort of beg your customer service representatives for information when you could make it transparent and very available to them. So empower your customers. Can people autonomously navigate your website and or even autonomously navigate your whole customer service process if it's even a physical one in person? You want people to be able to go backwards, forward, sideways, whichever way they want, so that they feel empowered. And it should be one that builds trust. You don't want to have any kind of bait and switch, small print, hidden costs. These are all things that destroy the customer experience. You want a customer experience that is both consistent and predictable. And we've talked before about the success of McDonald's, which is not the best burger in the world, not even close. And yet they've probably sold more burgers. I don't know if that's, I shouldn't say probably. They've 100% sold more burgers than anyone else in the world. It's not because of the quality. And so the consistent is overall the value equation seems to be there for people when they consider a meal. So McDonald's is very consistent and predictable. I recommend that you consider using checklists for your processes to make sure you don't skip things. And it's very disappointing. There's one restaurant that you can think of the Benihana in the United States. They have the what do you call it, teppanyaki restaurant chain called Benihana, and they do the whole thing. If you've been to a teppanyaki restaurant, you've seen the little onion volcanoes and the guy chopping up the meat and the vegetables in front of you and everything. And the local one is a great business from a lot of perspectives. But if you go in and they skip one of the things, especially if you brought someone along who hadn't been before and you want them to experience what your experience was and something was skipped, it'd be very disappointing. And that's why I would say you want to either have people well-trained where they know and they don't skip steps, but use checklists whenever it's practical. Also, be sure that your operational team is very well-versed in what your expectations are, well-trained. Your customer experience should make people feel good. Just think of it that way. Are people feeling good at the end of this? You're smiling. Do they have a smile on their face when they go through this? And what things can you do to make them feel good? You want to make sure that you have a safe and secure environment. Think about tourism and hospitality, these types of things. You want to make sure that people feel personally secure, like their person and their family, their kids. So businesses may employ guards that are visible, well-identified, well-vetted personnel. They have physical boundaries to prevent people who shouldn't be on the premises from entering, and they're well-lit, these types of things. So people need to feel safe and secure to have a good customer experience. You want to protect people's private information with encryption and processes that ensure that you're not leaking very sensitive data. And I've seen that as well, where people leave photocopies lying around that have personal information on it. You wouldn't want your medical records or anything, even a copy of your driver's license, something, financial credit application, banking documents that are just open and accessible to the public. Those have to be well secure. And your property, if you have private property with you, and again, I think of things like the hospitality industry, if you're at a hotel, you want to make sure that the property you have with you is secure and not going to be stolen. That's part of the customer experience. These things are very obvious, but I'm asking you to go through this step by step and make sure that in your business that you've considered all these things. Is someone engaging with you, and is part of your process leaving them vulnerable to their property being stolen in some way? Maybe your delivery process for your product, people come and pick it up and they just have to run in quick, and the place where they park isn't secure, isn't well lit. These types of things, you've got to bear that in mind. You got to think about that. It detracts from the customer experience. People should have a clear conscience after engaging in your customer experience. So is it healthy? Is your product or service healthy in your customer experiences? Does it lend to their health, detract from their health? Is it responsible? Is it a guilty pleasure? Perhaps you sell delicious desserts. You're a bakery. Consider, is there some way of communicating an offsetting virtue? The whole concept of you've earned it. There's some psychological studies done about where people will pick in the produce departments of grocery stores, they'll pick out fruits and vegetables, and then when they're in the bakery department, they'll feel justified in grabbing the cake or the treats because, well, I'm doing the right thing here. I'm eating my veggies, so I can also I can reward myself. And you can use your sales staff and your marketing channels to communicate those offsetting virtues and those messages to people like, you've earned it. You've come to this great restaurant. It's a special occasion. You only live once, these types of things. But the whole key is your customer experiencing something that makes them feel good or something that makes them feel guilty? And you can tell which one is going to detract. Consider whether or not your customer experience is family friendly. Is it stress-free, hassle-free, painless? And when I say painless, I mean literally. There are some healthcare practitioners that their customers, their patients, have to experience pain. And what can you do to mitigate that? What things can you do to offset that so that when your people, or your customers, rather, your patients experience pain, that they still don't decide that they're never coming back, whether it's a trip to the dentist or the chiropractor or physiotherapist or whatever. Is there something you can do to mitigate that versus what your competition is doing? Remember, you just have to be better than the others that are doing what you do. You may not be able to eliminate something completely, but you might be able to minimize that pain. So you want to have an environment that is clean and no adverse residual of some kind. I think of you contractors who are going into people's homes, and when you leave, do they have to go around and clean up after you? A good business that operates on location at its customer's home or place of business tries to leave it the way it was, or better, ideally better than the way they found it. So you would clean up after yourselves and not be that impactful while you are there, and certainly not create a chore for your customer after you leave. Those are the things that improve your customer experience. Let's dive into convenience. And we've always said that there is overlap between convenience and customer experience. So I would say to you that, if you find these things improve one or the other, that's fine. They improve both. But I tried to break these out and itemize them in their categories so that you can distinguish between the two. And just to differentiate, as I have before, certainly convenience and customer experience are not the same thing. If something's convenient, that can improve the customer experience, but they can be very different things. And the example I gave is, if there's a business you love to attend, it might be very convenient for you if it was very close to your residence or close to your place of work, but we've all driven across town, and we've even gone on planes across the world or across the country to get to a particular business because the customer experience is second to none, and we want to take that in. If you want to go and eat at Jules Verne in the Eiffel Tower, you've got to go to Paris to do that. That's not very convenient, but the customer experience is something that you're trying to take in. Conversely, you may be willing to sacrifice customer experience to get, instead of going to, the boutique grocery store that just gives you this great experience, you go to the corner gas station to pick up some milk or a loaf of bread or some quick snack item or whatever. Maybe you're paying more and you're sacrificing other parts of the value equation in order to get convenience. So convenience is not the same thing as customer service or customer experience. Sorry. Let's get into convenience. So customers want to be free to do business on his terms. That's a very important thing for people. They don't want to be dictated how it is that they have to do business with you. So consider flexibility and adaptability with your processes to make it more convenient for your customer. People want to have the ability to research, communicate, and transact on their terms as well. So that's where the internet has been so powerful in driving a whole new facet of business, because people want the convenience of being able to do that research, that communication back and forth, and getting more knowledge and information, and even complete the entire transaction online. Are there things you can do in your business to improve that for the convenience of your customers? Scheduling flexibility, your business hours of operation, booking appointments online, all these things are really important. If I, in order to book an appointment with you, have to call and speak to a live agent and get put on hold, that's not very convenient if I could just do it online. And then some people prefer to talk to a live person. They don't want to go online. So if you do have appointment booking software that you're using, is it very convenient? You got to ask yourself these things. Do you have sufficient inventory capacities to meet demands? Now, we talked about capacities of other components of your business, such as your staff and parking and that kind of thing. But what about your inventories to meet the demands of your product or service, of your customers, the products and services that you have? Now, if you're in the service industry, you might dismiss the notion of inventory and think you don't have inventory, but of course you do. Your inventory is your time of your productive employees. So if you are an electrician, some kind of contractor, a plumber or whatever, your inventory is the number of hours of your specialized knowledge that you can sell. And if you have a team of plumbers and electricians, of course, then your inventory grows, your capacity is there. If you have customers having to wait too long, that's not very convenient. So make sure that you have sufficient inventories. It's convenient if your product or service is available when I want it. And that can be now or later. So I think typically in this day that we're used to hitting a click, and with Prime shipping, it's available same day or next day, that kind of thing. You may be considering that for the convenience of your customers, you need to have your products available right now. And that is true, for sure, that adds to convenience. But think of the opposite. Some people want to be able to order your product or service to come later. They've made the decision now and they want to be able to schedule it to arrive, next week or next month or whatever it happens to be. And you don't want to say, no, you either have to take it now or you risk not getting it. So that is something to consider for convenience. Your location is a big one. I've already used that example. Proximity to the customer wanting to do business. If you have brick and mortar location and people have to travel to your business, of course, it's more convenient the closer you are. And if you have multiple locations, that's a good thing. And then you want to try to add interventions to offset inconveniences. So consider whether you have you're performing service, or you're actually selling a product in which a person has to come to your location and they have to wait or whatever. Are you using interventions such as shuttles and valets? Do you have replacement products, loaners? Do you have entertainment, refreshments, various amenities to help offset the waiting and the inconvenience? That, these are things designed to minimize inconveniences, therefore it makes it more convenient. What about maintenance to critical utilities and tools performed when it's least likely to be needed, such as overnight? Maybe your product is software and you have to perform periodic maintenance of that software. Can you do it overnight when it's not needed? Or transportation, you might be servicing automobiles or something else, somebody else, you're servicing somebody's equipment for their business. Can you do it at a time? It might be convenient for you to be able to service their equipment at the same time that they're open for business, but that puts them out of business. So are you considering for their convenience being able to perform this in the middle of the night? Also, do you have various delivery options for your product? Can it be physically delivered to their home? And how quickly can that happen? Can they pick it up? Are there multiple locations they can pick it up? The key is for convenience, options. People like to have alternatives, options. Also, speaking of options, how about payment options? It's frustrating if you pull out your credit card and then the person says, oh, we don't take Amex, or we don't take credit card at all. So you want to make sure you offer various types of credit cards, debit, cash, and e-transfer. And I understand that you have to make these decisions because there's a cost to these things. All of these things that I'm speaking about here, that may be all well and good, that increases the value and it increases the convenience for your customer and it improves the customer experience, but it costs you money. So you're looking for a return on your investment. By improving the value, you want to offer things that will at least improve the value enough that could offset the cost that is added. And again, you're considering this versus the competition. So if the cost of being able to, the merchant fees of being able to offer a particular credit card don't make sense for your industry, I understand that. The key is you've got to ask yourself and really do an evaluation on this. Also consider, do you have a customer portal for invoices, receipts, payment gateway, and a place that people can go and check their order history? That's very convenient for customers. And do you have billing schedules? So maybe some people, in terms of payment options, would like to be able to pay monthly. Other people want to pay upfront for annual, and maybe they get a bit of a discount for that. These types of options all improve convenience. Do you offer mobile or app-enabled smart features or options? That's something that's very convenient, and there's plenty of examples out there. But ask yourself, I spoke with a business owner recently who over the last few years has offered a web-enabled, what I would refer to as an application to streamline one of the processes in engaging with their business. And I was very complimentary of the design of that, the concept. And it just added so much convenience for me. It was very informative, very easy to use, intuitive. And ask yourself, is there some way that you can offer web tools, apps, and mobile smart products, something that may turn off the lights, or you forgot to turn off the lights. There's these smart features in the home now and everything. So I recently, about a year ago, purchased some of these permanent Christmas lights that have all the different patterns and everything, and they're low profile, and they can stay up all year and you can use them on different occasions or whatever. But the app that controls them was a big part of the selling feature. And when these people first came out with this product, they didn't offer that. There might be a manual switch on and off, but nowadays it's so easy to add things to people's smartphones and to get them connected. So consider, are you doing that? If your competition is and you're not, where does that leave you? So automation, also time-saving, leveraging mechanisms that you might be able to offer your customers, like push notifications and alerts to them and reminders to them. I have a person who does seasonal work for me, and they send me a reminder. And the reminder basically says, you're on the list, we're gonna do this for you. You don't need to do a thing, we just wanted to give you a heads up. And if you don't want us to do it, then you can notify us or whatever. So it's very helpful. And that's an automated feature. They don't have to do anything to enable that. I mean, of course, you set that up initially. These types of automations we can handle for you, no problem, if you're not sure how to do that. You kind of have this sort of set and forget mentality to doing business with people when it's convenient for you, this asynchronous business mentality that automation can help with. Also, is there some kind of preventative or prophylactic benefits or assurances built in that's sort of inherent in your product that improves health security, sort of a side benefit of your main product? If, this is the one that comes to mind, but if you were a pet store and you were selling a pit bull, maybe the love and companionship of the little pit bull puppy, but it has also a security benefit. Well, that's convenient. It's convenient for customers to be able to take on extra benefits. That adds value, of course. versus, say, the alternatives that they have for spending their money. So those are the things that I would focus on regarding convenience, and you can probably think of some others. Now what I want to do is transition into quality. What things are elemental to and fundamental to building quality? And of course, you may think, well, if you have a product, it starts with superior materials and ingredients. And if you're using something to make your product in terms of a raw material or ingredient that is better, that is superior to the competition, then that's going to add more value. You want to make sure you communicate that. Also, the design and the engineering that go into your product. Those are two different things. The design, again, Steve Jobs was known for design, and people like the design of Apple products. And there's something to be said for a really slick looking product or whatever. That adds to the quality and adds to the value, but also the engineering of something so that it's simple to use, it's intuitive to use. The user interface is really good engineering. Also, superior assembly and production adds to the quality. And that's one of the things that Toyota was known for. You know, they talk about German engineering, but the Japanese had processes for production. Toyota mastered the production system. So the assembly and production made their products so much more reliable. So you want to use proven processes and competent personnel. Use the very best tools and equipment during production to make sure that you're getting superior quality. You want to have a controlled environment. If you were trying to assemble some product in a dirty environment that's messy and all that, you would have inconsistent results. The quality would go down. Quality speaks to something being free of defects. You want to make sure that you have very good fit and finish and exacting tolerances. So that was one of the things that Tesla was being criticized of. It didn't seem to slow their progress and their early success, but even though they had, much better range than the electric vehicle competition, and that they had pretty good reliability and things like this, the tolerances where they would have gaps in their body panels and all this kind of stuff. And that's something that they're working on. Also, their paint process wasn't very good. And so Elon Musk is now boasting that they have the most advanced paint system in the world that will be released with their Giga Berlin project. So making sure that you have great controlled environments as well as the right tools and facilities can increase your quality, and your fit and finish and your exacting tolerance is a big one as well. If your product is durable and lasts a long time, it will be thought of as being better quality. Is it reliable and delivers intended benefits without fail? It's nice to have something that's durable. You say this particular piece of equipment is built really well and it'll last for the rest of my life. But if it has intermittent problems, and I do have a product, a particular electronic product that I've had it for many, many years, and I don't know what's wrong with it, but it's not important enough, I guess, for me to replace it at this moment. But every now and then it just stops working, and I go back to it and I try it again and it's working again. And I've changed batteries, all sorts of things. I can't figure it out. In fact, I have a theory, a hypothesis. But reliability in addition to durability, those are two different things, and quality depends on both of those. You want to have consistent and predictable quality. So we talked about McDonald's earlier in terms of the customer experience. People want to make sure that the customer experience is consistent and predictable. And I gave you the example of the teppanyaki restaurant. You want consistency. You don't want to have steps in the process. And you could argue that part of their product was the experience, of course. In this case, in the quality category, you want to make sure, like let's say you had a food product like cupcakes or something, and one time you get it and they're delicious, and another time they have half the icing or whatever. That wouldn't be consistent, and that would detract from the quality, at least the perception of quality. And once again, let's bring up the senses. Quality, you need to have pleasing to the senses, especially taste. If you're in the food business and some sort of comestibles, you want to make sure that the taste is good. Sight, think about, we talked about design, the fit and finish. If you're in tourism or hospitality, the scenery, you want to make sure that the location that your customers interact with is clean, not dirty or cluttered. And again, with sight, if you're in software or some sort of visual, you want to make sure that things are high definition, not grainy or pixelated. And again, designed well so that the user interface is very intuitive and laid out nice. And that's huge. So sight is a big one for quality. Audio, same thing. If you can't hear me speaking right now, the quality of this video would be terrible. In fact, I purchased new sound equipment as I started making these videos to ensure that I gave a higher quality product. So audio is a really important thing. You want to have the right sound level, not too noisy, not too quiet. And again, depending on your business, that can be a factor. There is some people who really enjoy the internal combustion engine, growly loud, almost no muffler type noise. And yet now the electric vehicles are very, very quiet. So these things speak to quality as well. Smell. You want to have a pleasant scent or scent-free, no foul odors. Of course, you might be selling something that's known for a particular distinct pungent smell, like an expensive aged cheese or something like that. But the key is you don't want people to experience an unexpected, distasteful or unpleasant odor or scent. And then touch as well is a tricky one, depending on the industry and product. You should have no unintentionally rough or jagged surfaces. So, typically you don't want in your production of your product where there's little shards and things like this that it affects the perception of the quality and the actual quality. Even though the functionality of the product might be really, really strong, if there are things that are in the production system that don't give the right feel of the item, that's going to detract from quality. And then how heavy is it? You may want something to be very lightweight, like a very light laptop, a very light cell phone. On the other hand, you might want to have something that has some weight to it that gives the perception of greater quality, where take a feel of this thing and people are like, oh yeah, that thing's heavy duty, that kind of thing. It depends on the context. The key is with touch, things need to be comfortable for your customers and certainly not dangerous. So consider the senses as you consider quality. And quality speaks to, it minimizes unintended consequences, side effects, or collateral damage. You don't want to have a product that it does what it says, but it also has this side effect. Or again, with services, if you came into my home to do some work here, and then you left a mess behind, that's what I mean when I say collateral damage. Or you're a contractor that came here and you damaged something that, I know that UPS has a policy where they can't pull their big trucks onto my driveway. And it's a policy. I've said, you can back it up here if it's more convenient for you. And they say, we're not allowed to. They don't want to damage anything. And maybe they've had experiences in the past where they've damaged the asphalt or the concrete of someone's driveway. They've driven over the edge of a driveway and broke a sprinkler head, or maybe they've even run into the house, an overhang or something like this. So those are considerations that businesses have to have, is that there's no unintended consequences, side effects, or collateral damage associated. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to talk about with respect to quality, and we're in the home stretch. Thanks for bearing with me. The fourth one is pricing. And pricing in a market economy, prices will be a reflection of its omniscient nature, factoring in supply and demand and a myriad of other elements. So you don't have to worry too much. The good news is the pressure is off for you. You don't have to fret about finding the perfect price. If your price is right, your sales will be there. And if your price is not right, you will find that you're not selling. And so you might say, well, I have to fret about that. Well, what I'm saying is you will be getting feedback from the market. And so you do have to spend a little bit of time to make sure that you're pricing right to begin with, and then respond according to what the market indicators are. So respond to sales, essentially. take a look at what your sales are and make sure that you are pricing in such a way that keeps sales at a pace that manages well with your capacities and with your business model and where you're trying to get. However, in the context of value, generally speaking, lower is better when it comes to pricing. Exceptions, of course, include luxury markets and the too good to be true psychology. So what we want to do to increase value with respect to pricing, generally speaking, is to lower the price. Now, if you have a luxury item, there are certain watches and jewelry and other things, automobiles and luxury items, fashion, that the whole thing is a high price is what makes, that's part of their brand. And people want others to know that they are sporting that brand, that they're using that brand. And so they go out of their way to demonstrate that. And, those businesses would argue that they don't want to continually lower their price. That would damage their business model. And I get that. That's an exception. And most of the people watching this probably don't fit into that category. But if you do, of course, bear that in mind. And then there's the too good to be true psychology. If your prices are too low, if you found a way you're so efficient and streamlined that you can have prices that are an order of magnitude lower than the competition or whatever, be careful, because if you price things too low, then there is a perception maybe that it's too good to be true. It can't be good. And I remember one time I was selling a really cool toy in a garage sale when I was a young kid, and it wouldn't sell. It had the box, and it was a hovercraft, and it was a remote control hovercraft, and it worked like a jet, no pun intended. And I had it priced really low, and I talked to my dad and I said, nobody's buying this thing. And he said, you've got it priced too low. Price it higher. I quadrupled the price. The next guy in bought the thing. It was just the psychology. It was too good to be true. At the price that I had it set at, and I needed to clear it out. We were moving, and that's why we were having this garage sale. We were clearing out a bunch of things. Nobody believed that it could possibly be as advertised, so to speak, that it would be in working order and everything. Once we put the price up, it sold immediately. And that psychology exists for all businesses. Don't price so low that people will question the quality of the product. Generally speaking, you've got to be competitive with comparable offerings out there. So you want to have a competitive price. And if you can be a little bit lower, that's great. I mean, people keep their finger on the pulse of pricing pretty close for staple items. And then if you have any sort of uniqueness to your product, you can afford to maybe be slightly higher than the competition or whatever, but you do have to be competitive. With respect to pricing, you want to avoid nickel and diming your customer. Include your extra charges in an upfront or advertised price. Don't, after you've settled on a transaction with somebody, a selling price, that you then add, well, we've got to add this, this, and this. That's very frustrating for people. And of course, it detracts from the customer experience, and it's not a way of adding value to your pricing model. Elimination of muda, of waste, muda being the Japanese word for waste. That means you're going to streamline your processes, and that will drive down your expenses. Therefore, you can drive down your pricing. So that's on your checklist. That's something you're always doing to add quality, is you're trying to eliminate waste. You're trying to streamline your processes and have less costly production of your products or services. And you want to be below established benchmarks and barriers or thresholds within your market. So it may be that your product comes out to ideally be priced at, $1,200. And you think, well, if I could somehow get it under $1,000, that would be a very attractive price. Now that's quite a big difference there in my example, but get the idea. If maybe your product, ideally based on your model and your margins that you were hoping to achieve, would be priced at $1,050, and you're like, oh, if I could get it at $999, that would be much better. Then work to do that. That's what I mean about these established barriers or thresholds. And those are established by the competition and what the alternatives are. So pay attention to that. Do your homework and then try to come under those thresholds or those barriers where a person's like, I'd be willing to pay $10 a month for this particular software, but I'm not going to pay more than that. So you got to think about what the psychology is with your customer as it relates to these types of thresholds and everything. Ideally, your pricing would be dynamic and be able to respond to changes in the marketplace, and that it could be reduced with production volume and economies of scale. So you need to plan for that from the beginning, that your pricing will go down as you can afford to bring it down. And then also, when you have excess supply of product and a reduced demand, I would highly recommend that that's the dynamic pricing nature at play there, that you would offer sales, promotions, and discounts. And if you can automate that in such a way that your inventory system is tied into your pricing model and your marketing channels, at least alerts you to that, and you automate that in some way, that would be ideal. Now, you got to be careful, because I would also say that ideally your pricing should be stable and consistent. You don't want to send the message to the customer that it's so volatile, your pricing, that they just wait, because there might be a better price if they just wait a little bit. Instead, build in sufficient margin from the start. Make sure that you have margin so that if you had an unexpected cost, you don't have to raise your prices. I would really avoid raising your prices very frequently. This has to happen very rarely. So pricing to begin with, I guess, is a bit of a challenge, and make sure that you have some rhyme or reason to it, some great rationale to it, so that you have sufficient margins if an unexpected cost comes up, if maybe your raw materials or even your resources such as human resources need to increase, your cost of production goes up, that you can afford to keep your prices stable. And then what can happen when your prices, due to economies of scale, if your production volume reduces the price, or rather it increases the margin, it reduces the price that you could afford to sell for, I wouldn't right away reduce the price. Instead, considering adding some additional benefits at the same price. Whenever that's practical, that makes sense, because then you allow for the aforementioned problem, that if something spikes in terms of material of production or whatever, you can still be safe. But adding some other benefits to your product that weren't included before is a great way of reducing the price without actually affecting the transactional price. It's adding value. And then we've talked before about using psychology such as anchoring, framing, various analogies, and also the display strategies. Whether you use the $ or not is a psychology in pricing, whether you use nines at the end or an even number, these types of things, you can do a lot more homework into all of those things. Yeah, there's just a lot of psychology in pricing, and I think maybe what we'll do in the future is take a little bit of look at those who are starting businesses from scratch. How do they establish pricing? I didn't want to cover that in this video. It was a lot. Today you bore with me through a lot. So just remember, always add value every way you can. Go through this video, rewatch it, pause it, watch it in sections, whatever you need to do to come back time and again to looking at how you can add more value. That's what it comes down to. That's why I say it is really the most important factor. And then you can talk about somehow communicating that to your intended market, your target market, because you don't want to keep a great product or service value a secret. It'll get out there through your customers, and ideally that would be the way it would spread, but you may have to invest some money in marketing and advertising and do that kind of thing. So adding value, perpetually looking for ways to improve the value is critical, and then communicate that to your customers. Remember how we started. Let's go full circle back to the beginning here. Measure everything so that you can see if you're going in the right direction, and include that feedback from your customers. Pay attention to the organic feedback that happens, but also ask for it. Solicit feedback from your customers. That is the ideal situation. We're going to leave it at that today. That was a lot to take on. Thanks for bearing with me. Leave some comments, discuss this, share with the community other ideas you have for adding value in those 4 constituent elements of the value equation. What other sort of general phenomena surround the idea of value? Let's learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.